Folks, I'm Helen Paris. I have lived in the Villages with my husband for 6 years. We live in Olivas, and we are part of a group called Villages for Change. We'd like to thank you for taking about an hour of your time out today. In our first meeting, we went over some of our core concerns, which are communication, cost, and safety. And we listened in the dialogue and the comments that many of you sent on to us via our emails, as well as the chat from our first meeting. So what we decided today was the most important and pressing concern is the costs of living here in the Villages. We have two people that have been really instrumental in doing a deep dive into that, and that's Delia Maki and Ron Steckel. And what they have done is they have put together a presentation, and Ron is going to talk to you about that through about 20, 30 minutes, depending upon how quick Ron talks. And then we're going to try to ask the questions that many of you have submitted, as well as in the very bottom, you can use the chat feature and you can type in a chat either to any one person or to the group. And then I will try to call on you to let you speak that question. And then our experts, Del and Ron, will answer those questions to the best of their ability. And then at the conclusion, we're going to give you a little bit more information about what we're doing. But most of all, we just wanted to say thank you for taking your time this afternoon. So Liz, you can pull down the Villages for Change and share the sharing screen. And then we're going to go over to Ron. Ron, are you on board?
I am.
Want to give a little wave so that everybody knows who you are? And what I would suggest, folks, if you want to see everyone, you can keep scrolling through the screens. And if not, you can go in your upper right-hand corner and you can actually just see who's ever speaking at this time. And if you do have anyone that is having a problem with the link, and if you use the chat feature, I can send it out to those people. Okay, that way we can kind of keep things rolling. But again, thank you all for being here this afternoon. We hope that this is informative. We hope that that you come away with some ideas that you can help us with as well. So without further ado, Ron Steckel.
So hi, good afternoon. As an introduction, I am Ron Steckel, and I've resided in Olivas, the estates, for 6 years. And as a follow-up to our inaugural Villages for Change, or what we call ourselves VFC, Zoom call last month, we have diligently assembled all of your inputs and inquiries. To no one's surprise, the vast majority of feedback revolved around costs, HOA fees, expense control, capital improvements, operating staff, reserves, etc. So today I'm going to focus on the financial, the cost pillar of our platform, and my goal is to try to answer all of the questions that we culled from the feedback from you and in personal conversations we have had with many of you. So let's begin with an overview of the basics. The successful management of overall finances requires an understanding of where we are today.
Liz, I don't see your screen anymore.
You're muted, Helen.
Sorry, Ron, but Wendy, we are not, you missed that, but we are not putting anything up. It's just Ron for right now. We're not going to put a bunch of numbers up until later. Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, missed it.
That's okay.
That's all right. That's all right.
The successful management of overall finances requires an understanding of where we are today and where we project to be tomorrow. There needs to be a plan with measurable outcomes in order to reach our goals. If there is no plan, nothing will change. Fundamentally, the Villages is just a $30 million business, just like a $30 million business. And just like our personal family budgets, it is comprised of ins and outs. To remain viable, whether a personal or business perspective, the outs, the expenses, cannot exceed the ins, which include revenues or income. They have to be in balance. So focusing on our first subject, which is revenues, specific to the villages, our total annual revenues are nearly $15 million. The number may surprise some of you, but $15 million is revenues for the villages. Now, that is derived from 4 categories. Assessments, which are HOA fees, something near and dear to all of us, the restaurant and bar, the golf-related activities, and then advertising and other miscellaneous items. These 4 categories represent the vast majority of every place where revenue can be derived. Assessments, our HOA fees, are the largest category at 60%. So out of all the places where money can come from to fund these villages, HOAs is 60%. It's $9 million. Now, because the HOAs represent 60% or $9 million of the total $15 million, it is the go-to source of revenue. It is also the easiest source to tap. In other words, it's easier to raise our HOAs than it is to effectively manage the restaurant and golf-related activities. It's important to understand that. It's the biggest category and it's the easiest category to tap. Over the past 3 years, HOAs have increased 6.2%, 4.9%, and 6.1%. That's over 3 years, averaging 5.7% per year. These are verifiable numbers. You can look back at the deductions taken from how you pay for this, and you'll see that those numbers prove out to be accurate. These runaway HOA increases are real, again, based on actual data, with little likelihood of changing. A more impactful illustration of this trend might be to take a hypothetical monthly HOA cost of $1,000 today. Some of us pay more. I'm sure some of us pay less. If you take $1,000 HOA today, that's per month, it would increase to about $1,200 per month in 3 years and nearly $1,750 in 10 years. Many of us live here or plan to live here more than 10 years. So we would see those kinds of increases during the time where we're residents. To expect something different than this trend is naive. And to accept this as normal business is just plain wrong. Most importantly, targeting HOA fees as the primary source of income is not sustainable. It may be easy to do, but it is not affordable to us, the residents. The budget planning process for 2021/2022 has already begun. It finalizes in about mid-April. So we are already on the path towards another, what I call unacceptable budget based on what we are hearing. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you go back to the Villager just about 3 weeks ago, there was actually an article from the 2 board presidents about the state of affairs. And here are some exact quotes from those articles, from those individuals. These are what they said. Many cost drivers are outside of the board and management control, like labor, building supply costs, water, and insurance. In other words, sorry, but we can't do anything about that. It's out of our control. Another comment, Silicon Valley is the most expensive place in the United States to live. We know that. A third one, costs have never gone down since 1977. Really? Another one, it is only reasonable to expect the same cost inflation over the next 44 years. 44 years, they expect the same thing to happen, and they're actually publishing that that's what their thoughts are. Home ownership costs are going up for all homeowners. Rossmore, another senior adult community in Walnut Creek, is also facing the challenges of rising HOAs. So it's just not us. Look, when I hear that this group, the directors, the boards of directors, the same group that sets policy and directs the management team to deliver a workable budget to us, the residents, are saying these kinds of things right in the middle of a budget planning cycle, based on the history of what we've already seen over the past 3 years, it is clear to me that the current board's philosophy is that HOA increases are just the way it is. With our leadership talking like this, what do you think will come out of their deliberations over the next several months leading up to April and May when the budget's finalized? If a business like a restaurant, a nail salon, or even a 7-Eleven, for example, was managed under such a cavalier and defeatist attitude, it would go bankrupt. If the owner of one of these businesses felt this depressed about how things were, and oh, woe is me, it would go bankrupt. The only source of income from a business are its customers. The primary reason the Villages is able to continue to operate is the ever-present source of residents' money via HOAs. Management is not shouldering the responsibility for expense control. They wholeheartedly put that burden on us, and that burden is our HOAs. Look, we have all worked in companies in our careers over the years that were exposed to these same budget challenges. As managers, many of us have had to cut budgets, cut staff, cut projects to align with what is affordable. As employees, some of us have even lost our jobs due to necessary cuts to keep a business afloat. So the challenge to Village's leadership is nothing new. In fact, the cost cuts required to achieve 0 HOA increases this next budget are modest compared to what is expected from Silicon Valley companies that we have all been involved in and all seen that we have to deliver to keep those businesses viable. What would be expected to have 0 HOAs here in the Villages this next budget year is modest. It's almost a rounding error. But yet it translates to HOA increases that we see every single year. You see, companies are accountable to shareholders, and our management and boards are accountable to no one. We are simply their ATM machines. It is imperative that we stay vocal about our views and we vote in the people with the experience necessary to achieve the appropriate changes that we require. It is important to understand that the 2021-2022 budget is when it's finalized later this year, like I said, April, May, it is not locked in. It is a piece of paper. It is not locked in, and it can be immediately thrown out by those in charge at the board level, sending management back to the drawing board to deliver a budget reflecting 0 HOA increases. The budget is simply a guide for discretionary thinking. It is not the Bible. So even though we're in this process, we're not going to be stuck for another year with the same sad story. If we have the right leadership, we can fix this anytime. It could have been fixed 9 months ago, 10 months ago, whatever. Again, the Villages is simply a business, but leadership that accepts the status quo and skirts the hard work of making tough decisions must be changed. If left unaddressed, the trajectory of future HOA trends will undoubtedly follow what we have already experienced, and it will only get worse. The current discussions by the boards about what next year's HOA increases might be exceed 5.9%. Okay, other revenue sources. Remember, we talked about HOAs. We talked about the assessments. And even though HOAs represent 60% of where money can come from, there's still $5.5 million other dollars. What are they? Well, it's the restaurant and bar, it's the golf course, and it's called another one called activities and advertising. There's $5 more million out there that we could find additional revenue from. We need to leverage those sources, because if we don't leverage them, it's going to come out of HOAs. And today, the contribution from the restaurant and the golf-related activities is not a meaningful enough number to offset the HOA demands. These revenue target areas cannot be allowed to simply exist without challenging their cost structure. I'm talking about the restaurant and the golf activities. We need to challenge their cost structure in terms of profitability, expenses, management, and whether there's value added. There are many other ways to maximize income generation from this combined asset of $5.3 million. So now you have HOAs, restaurant, golf related, and other activities all contributing to revenues. And we start to share the burden, not just put it on the shoulders of the residents. At this juncture, at the villages, there are fundamental questions concerning the restaurant and golf course cost structure, but they are either being ignored or glossed over. It's just business as usual. It would be interesting to evaluate whether any of these other revenue generators were ever profitable. Well, how would we do that? Here's an example. The question is, could they stand alone without any additional funding? Could they be like that 7-Eleven business or the nail salon without any other income source except its customers? A way to do this would be go back a couple of years when these areas were operating unencumbered by any COVID-related restrictions, thereby removing the mask of COVID. No more excuses about COVID. Let's go back to when things were just great. And if these two places, the golf course and the restaurant, were not profitable or not self-sufficient in the best of times, they will never be acceptable in these more challenging times. So let's go back and do the study and see how well they were. And if they were not viable when times were great, then things need to change. $5.3 million of opportunity needs to get better. As an aside, here's a creative idea that might bring a smile to some of you, your faces. How about if the restaurant would introduce fresh pastries in the morning, brownies all day, cookies and ice cream at the bistro? I can't tell you how many times I would say to my wife, boy, I'd be so happy to have a cup of coffee and a brownie, some ice cream on this hot summer day, but they don't offer those things. Why not? Just little silly things like that add up. It is important to understand that any increase in revenue from these other areas directly offsets the burden on our HOAs directly, and should therefore be the first place to look. And that's why we need to leverage these other areas. That's revenue. Remember, the other side of the equation is expenses. You can make more or you can spend less. So now let's talk about the spending less. When we shift to expenses, the total village's expense number is $16 million each year. And it comprises 6 categories: wages and benefits, the cost of sales called supplies, materials, and things that we consume, landscaping, water utilities, Comcast, and outside services. Those 6 categories are the expense recipients of $16 million. Wages and benefits are 62% of the total, $9 million. So any meaningful effort to reduce costs must focus on these areas, but most aggressively wages and benefits. Again, it's the largest category. For those of you that didn't appreciate this, it's $9 million of wages and benefits, 129 staff out of a total of $16 million. So, you don't want to focus on the little things. You got to start with the biggies. The current state of affairs with respect to wages and benefits is untenable. And for the board to just let it continue, quite frankly, breaches their fiduciary accountability and responsibility. Just like our HOAs, this wages and salaries category is a runaway train, also going in the wrong direction. Our HOAs are going up, wrong direction. The salaries and wages train going up and already up, wrong direction. Overall, wages and benefits increased 6.2% this year. So what that number, when I told you $9 million, well, it used to be 8.5. Guaranteed next year, it's going to be another $500,000 increasing. Of that, the wage pool increase was 3.75%. That means the average salary increase on that wage line, 3.75%. Benefits increased 9.8%. Healthcare, time off, vacations, other things. And this also includes an unmatched automatic 401k contribution of 3%. This is a rich package. The $9 million is spread over many departments. I'll tell you what they are, just so you get a feel for it. Obviously, the restaurant, maintenance, public safety, admin, janitor supplies, janitorial, pro shop, and community activities. Of all of those departments, totaling 129 people, the largest category of staff is the restaurant. Makes sense. It's a lot of people to run that restaurant. That $3 million asset we have. But there's also some funny numbers that jump out. There's 18 people in public safety. There's nearly 12 people in administration. Janitorial, 10. Community activities has 4 people, and I haven't been on a community activity the whole year. And this does not include $1 million spent on outside services and consulting. $1 million. Now that number of $9 million just grew to 10. So regarding staff levels and salaries, here's some questions I have. And this information is hard to get. The boards are not as forthcoming about some of the information we are trying to get a hold of. One question, what is the actual head count currently? Considering the extreme lockdown situation, what reductions have been implemented? Certainly there should be less than 129 people. Why is the 3.75% wage pool increase so high compared to the norm? In the Silicon Valley, for those of you that are still working, or for those of you that remember back, the average raise over the last several years has been 2%. 2%. Are we receiving the appropriate service from each operating department? Or is it just business as usual? What is the value versus the cost of every single department? Are salaries goals-based or just automatic? I know where I worked, it was goals-based. And there were years when it was tough to get any raise. There were also years that raises were frozen. Do we reward tenure over performance? And what is the actual staffing levels on a monthly basis, by department, by name? Not that everybody here needs to see it, but we need to understand where we stand today. It's all a bit of a black hole. The conclusion is that there's a huge disconnect between staff levels and amenities currently being offered. I go back to the activities department, 4 people. What are they doing? What are they doing? An immediate and extensive deep dive is required of all staff levels, the skills that they offer, the performance, the structure, the compensation, and the accountability to correct this situation. Now, beyond salaries and wages, remember there were 5 other categories. This was just the biggest one. The other categories still represent the other half of the money, $7 million. Remember, salaries and wages was 9. Well, the other 7, they make up those other categories, which were landscaping, water, utilities, Comcast, and outside services. They all warrant a deep dive with a clear goal to determine need versus want, cost versus value. The opportunities for efficiency and cost reductions abound here at the Villages. Just like revenue, any expense reduction from this combined total of $7 million directly offsets HOA increases. It doesn't have to always come from us. You can spend less. I just told you where, salaries and wages and those other 6 categories, or you can make more. Where? Restaurant and golf. Now, some of you and other residents have sent tons of suggestions about what we could do. As I say, these suggestions abound. There's suggestions about rethinking landscaping, IT enhancements. We're in a Silicon Valley. I guess it's that most expensive place in the world, but we don't really tap into the IT opportunities very much, do we? We're still getting the Villager delivered to us in the mailbox. Increase outside use of the golf, tennis, ping pong, pickleball, bocce. Anything that's an asset should be leveraged because it's our asset. And so people say, well, I won't be able to golf because some other people will be on the golf course. It's an asset. Let's figure out how to be smart about it. Outsource the restaurant. It's a $3 million entity. It's not making it. I'm not talking about closing down the restaurant. I'm talking about, can it survive? And if it can't, let's figure out why, how to make it survive or manage it differently. The Comcast contract, I heard somewhere, and I'm not sure, it's a 23 or 21-year contract. It's up for renewal. Let's get that right this time. We have a ton of in-house expertise. There's no interest in tapping into it. It's ignored. Free expertise. Cover the swimming pools. If for no other reason to avoid evaporation, oh, that's a water cost. That's going up, but that's uncontrollable. No, it's not. Cover the pools and it keeps the temperature intact, so it doesn't cost so much energy to heat them. How simple is that? Okay, so people ask, have you guys or any of you residents told the board these ideas? And remember, the board doesn't look at next door. They ignore it. I can't understand why such a great conduit for communication is ignored, but it is. So have we told the board these ideas? And the answer is, these ideas and so many others have been communicated to the board directly during board meetings, via Nextdoor, letters to Pulse, and the responses are not forthcoming. Suggestions are often ignored or pushed off to a later date. Board meeting interaction is highly regimented, resulting in a token 2-minute Q&A period per question. If you want to feel like a miniature little shrunk person, try to ask a question at a board meeting and tell me how you feel, how they treated you during that exercise. These suggestions fall on deaf ears. How do I know that? Look around. What's changed? Nothing's changed. It's only gotten worse. The promises for open communication and transparency, heavily broadcasted during election campaigning, never materialized. So I have some takeaways, a lot of numbers. They're not that hard when you think about it this way. Think of your own personal finances. It's the ins and the outs. We have ins and outs here. They have different names, same stuff. Takeaways from this session, things I'd like to leave you with to resonate, maybe hopefully as they do with me. Number one, actual results indicate that increasing HOAs will continue as long as the attitude remains, that's just the way it is. And that attitude is prevalent by our leadership. This translates directly to tarnished desirability and affordability of our homes, eroding resale value, unmanageable challenges to fixed income residents, of which many of us are, and a measurable exodus currently taking place from the villages. This is a travesty, and the responsibility falls to the board and the GM. A new culture is required that embraces the goal of 0 HOA increases, not less, not controlling the out of control costs, 0. It's a real simple number, 0. So that we can achieve a sustainable balance between cost and benefit. This is going to require a major paradigm shift. Guys, you don't hear coming out of those quotes in the Villager anybody capable of managing a paradigm shift in their thinking. Another one, the days of hiding behind the costs of water, maintenance, and salaries. Oh, woe is me, how high they are. Those days are over. To do budgeting right, nothing is sacrosanct. Nothing. Everything is on the table. It's all about value and cost, need and want. Every expense category needs to be evaluated to determine what value it brings to residents, and hard decisions need to be made if the cost does not provide a meaningful benefit or service. It's very simple. Go back to when we worked in companies. It's the same story. Nothing's changed. This analysis requires a top-down and a bottoms-up assessment to weed out the excesses. Changes will need to be made, costs reduced, and a restructuring of priorities is in order. We need to open-mindedly consider the potential outsourcing of all village management, as also the restaurant and the golf course pro shop. If it can't be done by those who have the responsibility today, then we at least deserve the opportunity to assess what our options are. Every day we do not get a handle on these disconnects is a day lost at the residents' expense. Any of these changes could have been started anytime. It doesn't matter, but it didn't. So it's a cost that we bear because it's the cost of doing nothing falls on us. It's time to have management sharpen their pencils, get creative, and think outside the box and deliver real value to us. At the upcoming election for new directors, Be mindful of your decision. Your personal well-being and finances are on the line. This is the election that shuts down and closes down in June. It's going to be starting soon. Don't just vote for who you know. Who's my golf buddy? Who's my swim mate? Don't just vote for who you know. Vote for what they know. Can they get the job done? We haven't been voting very effectively so far. Maybe the candidate source, the pool of candidates hasn't been that great. Remember, when the tough got going a little while earlier in the year, 4 directors bailed out, and so did the general manager. When the tough got going, what did we see? They left their post. Vote your pocketbook, people. We don't need a management team to tell us no. We need them to figure out how to say yes. Real meaningful change is necessary right here, right now. VFC, Villagers for Change, knows what is required and how to execute. We are ready. We are ready, willing and able to be part of the solution. Let's get our peace of mind and our dreams back at the Villages. Thanks for your time. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Helen.
Well, folks, this was a presentation of a lot of thought. I know that a lot of you will want to see this and study it, and we will be making slides available so that you can look at it later after this, as well as we will also be putting this whole recording online so you can share it with others. But Ron, I have some questions coming in. The first question that I have is, how far in advance are the HOA fee increases decided? Are the increases for this fiscal year already determined for July? I think you got to that a little bit, but could you just keep it succinct?
Sure. So the process has already started. What that involves is many of the departments start to submit their sort of needs to management at the higher levels. The HOAs, which is sort of the sum total of all of that, will occur later in the process because it's a roll up of numbers. And so I would say, to answer the specific question, that would be finalized around mid to late April.
Okay, and then Ron, to follow up on that question, once the departments submit their wishes, what's wrong in that process right now?
Honestly, what I've learned, and I may be wrong, but what I've learned is it seems like the attitude is that as long as sort of the expenses and the costs, the expenses and the revenues kind of match up, to the extent that the ongoing level of HOA increases just continues, that's acceptable. In other words, it's not about zero. It's about, look, the average increase is 5 or 6% HOAs. So as long as we keep in that ballpark, the other things can kind of just work around it. And that's what's wrong with it.
Okay. We have, and I'm going down the list. So if you have a specific question, please shoot it down in the chat feature or raise your hand. Oh, Ellie, do you have a question? And you have to unmute yourself. Ellie, are you there? Okay, Ellie, there you go.
Raised her hand a long time, so.
Okay, Rick, do you have a question?
I have a comment. Something I've observed for a long time. I've asked board members why their voting results published in the paper always show the same. It's either yes or sometimes no, but typically all yes. The response has been that they work out the differences prior to voting. It's hard to believe that it's like they're yes men, and is that how they deal with management? Our boards deal with management too. It's all yes, no no's.
So I think that's a really good observation, and that's obviously what we see in the published results. I have to say, we have 4 new board members on the CBOD, and they're still coming into their own. In all fairness to them, we haven't yet seen how they're going to interact. But from what we do see is that many times when questions are asked by board members, the more powerful element, whatever that might be, tends to just drive the ship a certain way. And honestly, I think sometimes these boards are what I call in the old days good old boy clubs, and that's sad. What we need is an intelligent and effective debate about the issues. 7 people can't always agree on the same thing all the time or on different things all the time. Impossible. Impossible.
Ron, here's another question. Is public safety chartered with raising money by issuing tickets, and are they incentivized to do so?
That is a strong rumor. I can tell you, if you look at the Villager and you see the number of tickets being issued, it's astronomical. And it has clearly shifted to stop signs, as we all know. Now, the story you hear is, that's because a few residents felt that there was too many people going through stop signs. It was unsafe and we're in a dangerous environment. Well, somehow we all make it to the end of the day with that burden. It's not as real as it really is imagined to be, but these tickets continue to get issued. That is revenue. Is there an incentive? I scratch my head and I say, I hope not. I hope not.
Okay, Ron, we obviously have a lot of employees making minimum wage. So how could we ever realize labor cost savings if with the minimum wage effort? Is that where the money is supposed to come from?
Well, so when you look at the restaurant, 52 people, and you start thinking about, well, where could we trim some costs? If you trim half of the people in the restaurant, and by the way, there is some people furloughed right now because of things being cut back. Hard to know how many, but there is some. But you can't just focus on the big departments. You got to look at where the dollars are. And any savings on the salary line has to include, obviously, the higher salaries, which is management. And we have an interesting management here. There's sometimes, I think, more layers than we need. I'll give you a really good example of salaries and wages as an opportunity. You all know the general manager resigned in the fall. And that's a big salary. And quite frankly, with things being shut down like they were and all the restrictions we had, it might have been interesting to say, let's think about what we want to do about that opening. That's a big chunk of money. And therefore, we have an assistant general manager. Why don't we do like we did before we hired the current guy and let her run the ship for a while? She did a great job before. And let's put that money aside instead of spending it. But 30 days later, the general manager came back and said, I want my job back. Would you please hire me, mommy? And we did. So that whole debate about that salary expense was just vaporized. That's just not the way to handle when you're looking at the costs in a creative way.
Israel, do you have something you'd like to say? Make sure you unmute yourself, sir.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for letting me. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Stadel for a great presentation. And I want just to tell everyone that I was, without looking at the numbers in details like he did, I came to exactly the same conclusions. It's beautiful and it's very freshening to hear somebody bringing up those points. I want to also bring up a few things. First of all, I don't know how we are structured ourselves, but those things have to be addressed. And actually, I think Mr. Stadel mentioned it soon. We have to start working on that. And in order to start working on this, maybe we should be divided into groups tackling different issues and do it and go ahead and start it. For example, you mentioned sending wishes from every department. It should be some kind of prioritization system to see what goes above the line and what's under the line in those wishes. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, the way you do in business, you do a thing where you create, for example, let's look at public safety. Let's look at public safety. What about public safety would we all agree we want to have? Well, my vote would for surely be, I want the front gate. I want the front gate. I like having that security. And that's going to take what? 2 people together for safety reasons for 3 shifts. That's 6 people. You require that. And you have to have somebody who probably goes around and what they call a runner, the guy that goes out when there's an emergency, they let you get in your house if you're locked up, whatever so that's another person per shift. So that's 9 people. And you probably have a manager, that's 10 people. Well, we have 18. So now we say, okay, well, what else do we want in public safety? What else do we want? And we build up the budget and you come to what level satisfies your need and brings value to the residents. And the rest of it is called excess, is gone. That's hard work, hard decisions, but it has to be done.
That's it.
Ken?
1%.
We have seven
I-
cars sitting out there. We have a whole fleet.
1%. I would also consider giving the board direction, saying our HOA stands still, is not going to increase. If you need more money, you come out with where to cut, not where to increase.
Yeah, remember I said it's the easiest place to go. I did an exercise. It took me less than 1 hour and one piece of paper, and I came up with several scenarios to deliver 0 HOA increases 30 days after we implement.
I'm positive about it. I don't have a doubt about it. So let's start and do something. That's all. That's all. And I would like to have, by the way, a balance sheet, if it's possible.
Thank you, Israel. We're capturing all these comments. Ken Brady, I saw you somewhere. I think you have a comment. Ken Brady. Yeah, I see you, Ken. Make sure you're unmuted, Ken. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I put in a couple comments in the chat, but one of the things that I've always thought we should be looking for is sources of income other than the 4 that Ron mentioned. We have 1,200 acres here, and we don't really take advantage of some of the acres. And some time ago, we looked at growing grapes for not for a winery here, but just to provide grapes to a winery. And that didn't go anywhere. One of the big items that I've always thought we could make some money on was growing marijuana. That got shut down in about 3 seconds because we didn't want to have a village situation that people thought we're a bunch of smokers here. But if you look at all seriousness now, if you go back 5 or 6 years ago when this was proposed, if we had put that in, you know what's happening to the marijuana world.
Yes.
And we have given up an opportunity to make money, and people laugh at it. It's not a laughable item. It
Not
is a moneymaker.
Not today.
It would offset items that were concerns presented today. The
Well,
other aspect of Ron's presentation, the increases in assessments really need to be broken down by increases in assessments for the club versus increases in assessments for the association. They're 2 different animals, and they should be presented as 2 different items. So that's my comments for today, but I have others that I'll continue to support.
That's a good point, because one of our assets exactly is 1,200 acres. You know, Rossmore has 1,500 acres, and they're using their land in a much more productive way than we are. We have hiking trails, and that's good, but there's a lot of opportunity here.
Uma, can I call on you? Uma? Uma? You have to unmute.
Yes, unmuted, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Uma, did you have some thoughts you'd like to share?
Gosh, I've been typing away with lots and lots of thoughts.
You have. Is there one thing that you'd like to get across right now? I've been reading them all. And Liz is reminding me to keep reading them and calling on people. So if you have a point that you'd like to share, maybe we could just go through. Uma talked about when is the election. And Ron, why don't you just go ahead and tell them how many slots are up of what we know right now because of the amount of people that resigned.
Yeah.
On
So the 4 people that resigned out of 7, this is the club board. So 7 total, 4 resigned. Those positions were filled by appointments, which is within the authority. It's within the scope of the board to appoint people. Those people only have a term for the rest of that year. So they're all coming up. Those 4 new people are all coming up in June for reconsideration to run. Then out of the other 3 that are remaining, the president actually, Mike Filarski, his term's over, And I think Howie, who's a vice president, his term was only up through the rest of the year, which is June, I believe, which leaves one guy, Bob Wilk, I believe. So he's the only one. I think he has one more year on his term. So there's going to be 6 open positions on the club board. And I don't know the story for the association board, but that's what the story, that's what's up for grabs, so to speak. And the election starts, the election process starts. By the end of April, you have to make your interest known, and you become a formal candidate. And then you go through some campaigning to get the message out. My message is really simple. The only message we need to hear is 0 cost increases. That's the message.
Are you standing for election, Ron?
What do you think?
I think you should.
There are a few people that think that.
And you can be a real advocate for change. I mean, there are so many ways we not just cut costs, but I loved your idea of how do we generate revenue. Somebody said we have so much land, there's so much we could do with it. I mean, I have ideas like solar farms and maybe having Whole Foods run our restaurant.
Yes,
so
Whole Foods.
We have groceries and food, and we could charge Whole Foods a lot of rent. I mean, think of all the money that's coming out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that car that runs around without the driver that gives us rides here and there, that we're a test bed for them. That is an extremely hard thing for a company to come by a beta site to prove its technology. We should be charging them an arm and a leg for the for the privilege of being in here.
Yeah, definitely. And get rid of the paper villager. Come
Absolutely.
on, we're in the 21st century.
Yep.
Are we mad to have a paper thing which has 6 pages devoted to advertising the restaurant?
Mostly that's true.
you
That's
know?
exactly true. Yeah.
I
These
don't
are all
need
great
that.
ideas. They're all great ideas. And all of these add up. Every one of these adds up. You'd be surprised how fast you get to the right number.
Maybe I should stand for election too.
Yes,
That's an idea.
Yes.
we need women. We need women to run. Gary, I see your hand up. Could you share your thoughts, please? Gary, you need to unmute, dear. Unmute. Hang on, Gary. There you go.
One of the costs that Ron talked about was maintenance. I talked to Tom Muniz about 1.5 years ago or so about some issues, and I mentioned our maintenance supervisor. He said, well, I have 5 of those. And I've given that a lot of thought since then, and I don't know what 5 maintenance supervisors do here, but here's what you hear from homeowners. I called ours. We all have different ones. Most of us do. I called and they came out right away. I had another person told me, well, I had 3 issues. They didn't fix them right away, but they came out to check them right away. Well, you know what that means? We have an on-call maintenance man. Why do we have an on-call maintenance man? Another way to do that could be, just as an example. All right, thank you, Mr. Smith, for we have a problem. You see some dry rot. You're on the list. We come out every quarter with a contractor and we go through all our lists, see what needs to be repaired, then we have the contractor repair it. Well, instead of having this on-call maintenance guy, you have people that come out quarterly and fix various and sundry items. Obviously, water leaks, emergency items would be off the table in that regard. The point is this, that we don't need 5 people. We need to have a better job description and a different way of doing that than we're doing it now.
21 people in that department, 21.
Jeez.
When you see these numbers, they blow your mind. They're so big. They're so out of control. They are inflated. And it's because I don't know what happens when people leave the business world. They have all that skill, all that discipline of how to do things the way it needs to be done. And somehow we have a management group here that just either never got it or forgot it, or is just too lazy to execute. But we're paying for it. We are paying for it. Helen, you're muted.
Margaret, not Donahoe, Margaret Lamb. Margaret?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you, Ron, for doing such a wonderful job of analyzing all the numbers. So I have a question for the candidates who are running. Is it possible for them to come to Villages for Change and have a town hall with us so that we can ask them questions to kind of gauge their attitude towards, a balanced budget and fiscal, skills?
So
But you know
some,
what, I'm gonna, Ron, let me
Yeah,
take
go ahead.
that real quick. Just, let me say that the reason why Villagers for Change was created was to a large degree out of a sense of frustration because there was no meaningful pipeline to be heard from. And so what we have tried to do, these Zoom calls, you guys, it's coming out of your core group's pocket. We are paying for this because we believe so strongly in the villages. We love the villages, but we are deeply concerned about the runaway costs living here. And so as a result of that, we've created this open dialogue because we've been so frustrated not being able to get the dialogue in the other ways Ron has said. Pulse letters are scrutinized and they are edited. They are not printed if you don't follow certain guidelines. The Villager is not a open free speech environment. It is managed by the management. And so all we've been trying to do is give a dialogue where people can be heard. So I'm speaking on behalf of the core group to say we would love to host a seminar where all of the people could speak. And in fact, we are deeply committed to saying it can't just be our core group. We have hundreds and hundreds of people that have expressed an interest in our group. You guys, this isn't just a little willy-nilly thing. This is a large number of people. And all of you need to be out there saying, we believe in what Ron's message is here, and talking to your neighbors and passing it on. So we're going to keep that conduit open of communication. And so yes, we can do it. Yes, we want to do it. And we are deeply committed to asking all of you to hop on the ABOD and CBODs that are once a month, and that's tomorrow. There's no coincidence. There is no coincidence whatsoever that our meeting is at 4 o'clock today, the day before an ABOD and CBOD meeting. We have done that intentionally so that hopefully your blood pressure doesn't get too high, but that you will hop into those Zoom calls tomorrow. And the Zoom call with ABOD, hats off to ABOD for creating Zoom calls. Please pressure CBOD to create Zoom environments as opposed to webinars where we cannot see the people that are on. We are all citizens. We all deserve the right to be heard. So get on there and speak your issues. That's the most important thing you can do. And we have more little tidbits that are going to be coming your way, but we encourage you to write emails to all of the directors, because if you don't write those emails, they're going to think it's 6 or 7 people that are sitting around with a glass of wine on Friday night. They need to know that this is an active group of people saying, we love this place, but freeze the increases. If you have to make the tough decision that's Ron's saying, make the tough decisions. So Ron, I'd like to call upon you to kind of wind up your last minute thoughts, because I really want to hold to the hour commitment we said.
So look, what I shared with you all did take a bit of work, and I'm passionate about this, and it probably came out in my presentation. But I also came to the Villages as my forever home. My wife and I didn't come here to think about moving again. And yet, as the economics of the situation start to unfold, it becomes more and more and more difficult to realize that dream. So when I said in my last slide, let's do what we need to do to get our dreams back, I say that from my heart. I love living here. There's only one person who loves living here more than me. It's my wife. And yet I'm telling you, I see storm clouds on the horizon. So we got to figure out how to get those blown off.
And
So
Ron, can we balance this year's? Is it possible for the directors of ABOD and CBOD to say balance the budget and tell management to do so? Is it possible with your years of experience?
Absolutely. And that can be effective theoretically within 30 days of when we make the decision to do it, because it takes some time to unfold some things. But the bottom line is, I'm telling you, there's so much fat and so much opportunity in the revenue lines to get to the number we need to make that go away. And by the way, it's not just a 1-year number. We can do that for a while. And it doesn't mean we're going to stop doing all the things you're used to. It just means we're going to be smarter about what we do. So yes.
Good.
All right, folks. Well, I've got a hand up there. Alice, real quick.
I'm just wondering, how can we be taken seriously by the board? And because my experience with maintenance sometimes is that they don't take me seriously.
Wayne, would you like to try to answer Alice?
Well, can I make a couple of points here? We're talking strictly about the club board of directors now, and that HOA is $365.66 right now. Okay. Absolutely, we can control a lot of this because keep in mind, the manager of the Villages reports directly to the club board of directors.
Right.
We hired him. We could fire him. And I was on the board for 6 years. So I know that we can control a lot of these things. And I absolutely agree with you. You know, there was one point where we had a 0 increase. We've got another item coming up that's going to help us reduce the HOA a bit. And that is all of those solar panels down in the RV lot. That contract is nearing its completion, about 1.5 years. Then we will no longer be paying the bank for that system. And we will just be deriving the benefits from all of the electricity that we're generating down there. Right now, we're paying the bank and we're setting aside money for the balloon payment in
And
about 1.5 years.
So I think what there are two buckets. There is a CBOD and there is an ABOD bucket. And we did not get into the reserves today on ABOD. And we, if you guys, you know, by a thumbs up, if you want us to get into the reserves, we are happy to do so as much as we can. Keep in mind that this business structure here is not, as Ron said, it is not as open as possible. And we have had to pay for and petition for certain disclosures of money. So definitely there is more questions that need to be answered. Each of you, and Alice, I'm going to go back to your answer because I think Wayne didn't quite get all of that in there. But I think it's very important that each of us write emails. So tomorrow you will be receiving an email from Villagers for Change with the list of every single board of director. And we are going to encourage you to write letters because what the president of the board has said is in some of the meetings, when you have a petition or when you have large numbers of people, then they are forced to listen. And that was told to me directly by the board members. So you need to be active. There will also be a graphic coming your way. Liz, can you show that graphic now? This graphic, you know how we always put the okay out every October until this year to say we're okay during an earthquake? We have created our own a little graphic, and we are encouraging you to download this, print it, put it in your golf cart, put it in your window, put it in your car, because that is a way for all the villagers to see, wow, people really mean it. And there's a lot of people that mean it. And so we're not okay right now, folks, but we can be okay. So download this graphic, stick it where it's visible so everyone can see it. Make sure you comply with the signs to ensure that you are not putting it on your front lawn, because we can't do that. But you can stick it in your window, you can stick it in your car, and you can stick it on your golf cart or your golf bag and say, we want HOAs frozen. That's what you can do. And you can send a letter to every one of the directors to say, do what it takes to balance the budget. Don't balance it with the villager ATM machines, which is what Ron said today. We can't thank you enough for being a part of today. And we are coming back at you with another Zoom call again, because we believe each of us deserves the right to be heard. It's not 7 people on one board or 7 on another or 5 on another. And the village management works for us. So that's what we're trying to convey. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.